"You're just a burden to this family," my daughter-in-law Romy said, her words slicing through the air like a knife. I froze, my hands trembling slightly as I placed the serving dish on the table. The silence that followed her words was suffocating. Adam, my son, didn't speak. He didn't even look at me. I felt the heat rising in my chest, the sting of the insult burning deep. It wasn't the first time I'd felt this way, but it was the first time she said it so openly. So callously. Years of putting everyone's needs before mine, years of sacrifice, and this was how they saw me. A burden? I glanced around the table. My grandchildren, normally full of energy, were quiet, sensing the tension. I should have said something, but my voice was caught in my throat. Instead, I smiled weakly and returned to my seat. My heart raced, not from anger, but from a quiet, bitter realization. This wasn't a family anymore. It hadn't been for a long time. I had been walking on eggshells for years, hoping for things to get better, hoping that one day my son would see the way Romy treated me, but it never happened. Romy had always been dismissive, always so cold. I told myself it didn't matter. I had to endure. But tonight, something inside me shifted. I didn't have to endure anymore. As I sat there, watching my family, no, strangers, around the table, I realized that I had spent my entire life being invisible to them. It was time for that to change. I had planned for this moment. For years, I had kept silent, not wanting to rock the boat, not wanting to disrupt what little family we had left. But tonight, Romy had pushed me too far. I had prepared for this day, gathering my thoughts, collecting my strength. It was finally time to act. I excused myself from the table, my legs a little unsteady as I walked to the kitchen. The soft click of the door shutting behind me felt like the closing of a chapter in my life. In the quiet of the kitchen, I took a deep breath and reached into the drawer where I'd hidden the papers. I had been waiting for a sign, a moment like this, when I could no longer pretend everything was fine. I carefully pulled out the envelope, feeling the weight of what I was about to do. It was a simple piece of paper, but it held the power to change everything. I walked back to the dining room, my steps measured and deliberate. As I entered, I saw Romy still glaring at me, her eyes cold. Adam, who had barely spoken a word all evening, was now completely focused on his plate. It was as if I didn't exist, as if I were just another piece of furniture in the room. But I wasn't. I was still his mother. I was still the person who had given everything for this family. I didn't say anything as I walked over to Romy. I just handed her the envelope. Her eyes flickered with confusion before narrowing. I smiled, not out of kindness, but out of a quiet, internal victory. She opened it, her fingers trembling slightly as she read the letter. Her face drained of color, her eyes widening in shock. She tried to mask it, but I could see it, the panic in her gaze. She looked at Adam, but he didn't meet her eyes. I waited, letting the silence stretch between us, letting her squirm in it. "What is this?" she finally managed to ask, her voice shaking. "It's a letter from the lawyer," I said calmly. "The one you thought you'd been fooling all these years." Romy's eyes flitted to Adam again, but he remained silent. She took a shaky breath, her face now a mixture of disbelief and anger. "You can't," she began, but I cut her off. "I can," I said, my voice firm. "I've had enough, Romy. Enough of your games. Enough of being treated like I don't matter. I'm done." The room was so still, you could hear the sound of a pin dropping. I could feel the years of pent-up frustration and pain bubbling up, but I didn't let it show. I didn't need to shout. My calm was enough to make her realize how far she had crossed the line. For the first time in a long while, I felt a sense of control, a sense of power. I wasn't the invisible, silent mother anymore. I was Eleanor, and I was taking back what was mine. Romy's lips trembled, her mask of composure slipping. She was caught off guard. But it wasn't just her who was about to face the consequences. It was Adam too. This was the moment that would change everything. "You think this is about money, don't you?" I asked, my eyes not leaving Romy's. It's not. It's about respect. Something you've never given me. Romy opened her mouth, but no words came out. She stood up abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor, but I didn't move. I didn't flinch. I had waited so long for this moment, and now that it had arrived, I wouldn't let it slip away. The silence stretched on, and for the first time in years, I felt free. I didn't need their approval. I didn't need their love. What I needed was to stand up for myself. And I had done that. Romy stormed out of the room, but I didn't chase after her. I didn't need to. I had made my point. Adam stayed seated, his gaze still averted, as if he couldn't bear to face me. But that was fine. I had already faced the truth. It was time for them to do the same. I sat back in my chair, still not quite able to believe what had just happened. Romy's face was still etched in my mind, the confusion, the fear, yet something inside me felt light for the first time in years. I had done it. I had finally taken control. But as the minutes stretched into what felt like hours, the weight of the moment began to sink in. I could hear the distant sound of Adam's footsteps in the hallway, but he made no move to enter the dining room. He never did. Not when it mattered. My eyes flicked to the envelope I had handed Romy, still sitting on the table, a symbol of everything that had been building up for far too long. The truth was out, and it was like a heavy veil had been lifted from my eyes. For years, I had sacrificed everything, my time, my energy, my love, only to be pushed aside by the very people I had nurtured. It wasn't just about the house, the money, or the inheritance. It was about respect. Something I had never received from Romy. And now, I was done letting her walk all over me. My hands trembled slightly as I picked up my glass of water and took a sip, trying to steady my nerves. The silence in the room was unbearable, but it wasn't the kind of silence that made you feel calm. It was a heavy, suffocating silence. Adam had always been distant, but I had hoped, for the longest time, that his relationship with Romy wasn't the cause of it. I had always believed in family, in the idea that blood meant something, that my son would eventually see through her. But tonight, in that brief exchange, I knew the truth. He wasn't going to fight for me. He wasn't going to stand up to Romy. I had expected so much more from him, but he had chosen to stay silent, to remain passive in the face of his wife's cruelty. That thought cut deeper than anything Romy could have said. I had spent years convincing myself that I could handle the isolation, that I could endure the coldness of their actions, but now, I was no longer willing to settle for that. I didn't need them. I didn't need Adam's approval or Romy's acceptance. I had done everything for them, and they had taken it all for granted. And now, I would take back what was mine. I stood up slowly, the decision clear in my mind. It was time to stop pretending. I had lived with the illusion of family for so long, but I was done being the one who kept it all together while they tore me down. I walked out of the dining room and headed toward the living room. The house felt different now, the air heavier, as though it too was holding its breath, waiting for the storm to come. As I passed the family pictures hanging on the walls, I paused for a moment, staring at the photo of Adam and me on the day he graduated from college. He had been so proud, so full of life, and I had been there, cheering him on. But now, that seemed like a lifetime ago. I walked toward the study, where I had spent countless hours over the years, organizing paperwork, handling finances, doing everything I could to make sure they had everything they needed. I sat down at the desk, my hands resting on the worn wood, and for a moment, I just breathed. It was hard to let go of the years of effort, the years of giving without ever receiving in return. But I had to. I couldn't keep living like this. I had spent so much time making sure everyone else was happy, but who had ever asked if I was? I opened the drawer and pulled out the file I had prepared for this day. The lawyer had been clear about the steps I needed to take, and I had followed them meticulously, waiting for the right moment. This wasn't about vengeance. It was about reclaiming my life, my dignity. I could hear Romy's footsteps approaching from the hall, her heels clicking on the hardwood floor, but I didn't look up. I didn't need to. She would come, just as she always did, expecting everything to be as it was before. But this time, it wouldn't be. As she stepped into the room, her eyes darted around nervously, and I could see her try to put on that same cold mask she always wore. But it didn't work anymore. "What's going on, Eleanor?" she asked, her voice feigning sweetness. "We need to talk." I turned my chair slowly, meeting her gaze with a calmness I had never felt before. "I've been thinking about everything," I said quietly. "About all the years I've given, all the sacrifices, and all the ways you've taken from me." Her expression flickered, just for a moment, and I saw it, the guilt that she tried so desperately to hide. "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice now a little more defensive. "You know exactly what I mean," I replied. "You and Adam have treated me like I'm invisible, like I don't matter. But tonight, I'm done being silent. I'm done letting you both walk all over me." She took a step back, her eyes narrowing. "You don't know what you're talking about." "Adam and I." "No," I interrupted, standing up. "You don't get to make excuses anymore. This isn't just about the house or the money. This is about respect, something you've never shown me. And I'm not going to let you keep taking from me." Romy looked at me, her face flushed with anger, but I could see the fear behind her eyes. She knew, deep down, that I wasn't bluffing. This time, I had the power. "You'll regret this," she hissed. "You'll see how far this goes." I smiled, not with kindness, but with a quiet satisfaction. "No, Romy. You'll be the one who regrets it." The air in the room felt thick, suffocating even. Romy was standing there, her eyes still narrowed, her body tense, like she was about to pounce. But I had already said what needed to be said. She could try to intimidate me all she wanted, but the power had shifted. I was no longer the silent mother, the one who just took everything without a word. I had spoken up, and now the ball was in her court. Adam, still sitting at the dining table, hadn't moved a muscle. It was like he wasn't even there. I had always tried to convince myself that he would one day see the truth, but now I realized I had been fooling myself. He wasn't going to save me. He wasn't going to stand up to Romy. And that realization stung more than anything she had said. It wasn't just the betrayal, it was the fact that I had spent my whole life trying to make everything perfect for a family that didn't even care. And now, all I had was me. I had spent the years building my life around them, pouring everything I had into keeping the peace, making them happy, and in return, I had been pushed to the side, used, discarded. It was time to stop. My hands were shaking slightly as I turned away from Romy, but not out of fear. It was the weight of everything I had been holding in, all the years of silence and sacrifice. It had all come to this moment. I wasn't going to keep pretending. Not anymore. I had spent too long being overlooked, being the one who kept everything together while they tore each other apart. But no more. I wasn't going to be the invisible mother anymore. I wasn't going to let them make me feel small. I was going to take my power back, step by step. I had already taken the first step, by confronting Romy. But there was more to do. As the seconds passed, I could hear Romy shifting, her foot tapping nervously. She knew she was losing control. I could feel it. But I wasn't done yet. I had more to say. I turned back to her, my voice steady. "You've had your way for so long, Romy. You've manipulated, you've lied, and you've tried to push me out. But you've forgotten one thing, you can't control me anymore." Her face went pale, and for a split second, I saw her mask crack. She had always been so confident, so sure of herself, but now she was starting to realize that things were changing. I wasn't the same woman she had walked all over for the past few years. "What do you want, Eleanor?" she sneered, trying to sound confident, but there was a tremor in her voice. "What do you think you can do about it?" I didn't answer immediately. I just stared at her, letting the silence stretch between us. It wasn't something I had planned, it was just the way things had to unfold. I wasn't going to back down, not this time. You're right, I finally said, my voice calm, almost gentle. I can't change what's already been done. But I can change what happens next. And what happens next is this: no more lies. No more manipulation. You won't get away with it anymore, Romy. I saw her face flush with anger, but I didn't flinch. For the first time, I wasn't afraid of her. I was in control, and she knew it. I turned away again, my footsteps slow and deliberate as I moved toward the hallway. You can leave now, Romy, I said over my shoulder, my words carrying the weight of everything I had been feeling for years. And if you ever think you can pull this again, you'll have to go through me first. I heard her mutter something under her breath, but I didn't care to listen. I had said what needed to be said. The door slammed shut behind her, and for a brief moment, the house was quiet. I stood there, letting the silence wash over me. It wasn't the peaceful kind of silence, though. It was the silence of a new beginning. A beginning where I was no longer the invisible mother, no longer the person who had to endure everything. I was free. Free to live my life for myself. I heard Adam's voice, low and hesitant, from behind me. Mom, I don't know what to say. I turned to face him, and for the first time in years, I saw something in his eyes. Guilt? Regret? Maybe both. But whatever it was, it didn't matter anymore. I had stopped needing his approval a long time ago. You don't have to say anything, Adam, I replied, my voice steady. You've already made your choice. He opened his mouth, like he was about to argue, but then stopped. There was nothing left to say. The truth was out in the open now, and there was no going back. I'm not asking for your approval, Adam, I continued. I'm not asking for anything anymore. I've given enough. It's time for me to take care of myself. And I will. Adam didn't say anything else. He just stood there, his face a mask of confusion and guilt. But I wasn't looking at him anymore. I wasn't looking at anyone. I had stopped looking for validation from anyone years ago. I turned away and walked toward the living room. I didn't need to explain myself. I had already done enough explaining over the years. I had given them everything, and in return, I had been taken for granted. But that was over. I wasn't going to keep waiting for a family that had forgotten how to love. As I walked through the living room, I felt a strange sense of calm. For the first time in years, I was alone, but I wasn't lonely. I was free. And that was all that mattered. I woke up the next morning to a quiet house. The silence was different from the usual. It wasn't empty or sad. It was peaceful. I had always been surrounded by noise, family dinners, laughter, the sounds of children playing, but now, the stillness was something I had never truly experienced. And I liked it. It was like I could finally hear myself think. I had spent so many years trying to keep everyone happy, trying to fix things, trying to make the family whole again, but no more. It was time for me. I didn't have to wait for their approval anymore. I had been patient for so long, quietly enduring their disregard, but I was done. It was time for me to live for myself. I stood up from the bed and walked to the kitchen. The house was as I had left it the night before, untouched. The plates from dinner still sat on the table, the food half-eaten, and I felt a pang of guilt for not having cleaned it up immediately. But then I reminded myself, this wasn't about perfection anymore. It was about doing things for myself. I took a deep breath and started clearing the table. As I moved through the motions, I could feel a shift within me. For the first time in years, I wasn't just taking care of others. I wasn't just fixing their problems or covering up their mistakes. I was living for myself. And that felt liberating. As I wiped down the table, my thoughts drifted back to the events of the previous night. Romy's words still echoed in my mind, but now they didn't sting as much. They had once felt like a weight I couldn't bear, but now, they were just words. Words from someone who had no power over me anymore. I had stood up to her. I had finally spoken my truth. I had taken control of my life, and no one could take that away from me. I knew that Romy wouldn't just accept this. She wouldn't just back down. But I didn't care anymore. The truth had been revealed. She had shown her true colors, and now, it was time for her to deal with the consequences. I wasn't afraid of her. And I wasn't afraid of losing my son. Adam's silence the night before had cut deep, but I knew now that I couldn't change him. I couldn't make him see things the way I did. But I didn't need to anymore. I had spent my life trying to make him see, trying to get him to understand, but it had never worked. And it never would. I had to accept that. I had to accept that Adam, in his silence, had chosen his side. And it wasn't mine. But that was okay. It wasn't easy, but it was okay. I had spent so much time caring for others that I had forgotten how to care for myself. And now, I was learning how. As I finished cleaning the kitchen, I thought about what came next. I wasn't sure, but I knew one thing. I wasn't going to sit around waiting for Romy or Adam to make things right. It was time for me to take action. I had been holding on to the idea of family for so long, but now, I was letting go. The family I had known was gone. The family I had hoped for, the one I had fought for, was never going to be the same. But that didn't mean I had to give up. I didn't have to stop living. I wasn't done yet. I didn't know exactly what I was going to do, but I knew I had to start by taking back control of my life. I wasn't going to let anyone dictate my happiness anymore. I wasn't going to let anyone make me feel small, invisible, or unimportant. I was going to live for myself. And that was the most powerful thing I could do. I took a moment to sit down on the couch, letting the quiet wash over me. The weight of the past few years, the weight of everything I had endured, began to lift. I could finally breathe. And I realized, in that moment, that I had been strong all along. I had always been strong. I just needed to remember that. The days ahead would be difficult, but they would be mine to live. I didn't know where this journey would take me, but I was ready. I had taken the first step, and that was the hardest part. Now, it was time to walk the path I had chosen for myself. It wasn't going to be easy, but I knew I could handle it. And for the first time in a long time, I wasn't afraid. The door had closed on that chapter of my life, but a new one was beginning. And I was ready to turn the page. I spent the next few days in a strange kind of peace. It was as if the silence had become a new kind of companion, one that I had never known before. The house felt different, not cold, but calm. I no longer had to listen to Romy's snide comments or Adam's quiet acceptance of her behavior. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel invisible. It was like I was waking up from a long, exhausting dream. I went about my day without worrying about what Romy or Adam might think. It was liberating. I spent time in the garden, something I hadn't done in years. The roses my husband and I had planted together were in full bloom, their petals soft and vibrant. It was a reminder of a time when life felt more certain, more joyful. I had loved tending to the garden with him, back when we were building a life together. Now, it felt like a symbol of everything I had lost, but also everything I still had. The garden was mine. The house was mine. I was still here. And for the first time, that was enough. But despite the peace I felt, there was still a part of me that couldn't let go of the past. I kept thinking about the conversation with Romy, the way she had stood there, trying to make me feel small. It was clear now that I wasn't just some bystander in this family anymore. I had been in the background for too long, always making excuses for them, always putting their needs before my own. But not anymore. I knew now that I couldn't keep pretending that everything was fine. It wasn't. The reality of the situation had sunk in, and I realized how much I had neglected myself over the years. It was time to change that. I wasn't going to wait for Adam to step up, or for Romy to suddenly change her ways. I couldn't afford to keep waiting for someone else to fix things. If I wanted to be happy, if I wanted to take control of my life, I had to do it myself. As the days passed, I started making small changes. I enrolled in a painting class, something I had always wanted to do but had never made time for. I started going out more, taking walks, and meeting friends I hadn't seen in years. For the first time, I was doing things for myself. I wasn't just existing anymore, I was living. But even as I made these changes, there was a part of me that still worried about my son. I had always put his needs before mine, always tried to keep him close, but I couldn't deny that he had distanced himself. He hadn't called, hadn't checked in. I knew he was still angry, still upset with me for confronting Romy, but I couldn't keep walking on eggshells around him. It wasn't healthy for either of us. One afternoon, I sat down and wrote him a letter. It wasn't an apology, at least, not the kind he might expect, but it was the truth. I told him I was done trying to fix everything for him. I told him I was done making myself small so that he could be comfortable. It was time for me to live my life, and if he couldn't accept that, then maybe it was time for him to figure out what kind of relationship he wanted with me. I didn't send the letter immediately. I wanted to sit with it for a while, to let the words settle. But I knew that I had to send it. I had to let him know that I was no longer going to be the mother he expected me to be. I was going to be the mother I needed to be for myself. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of change. I got more involved in my community, joined a book club, and even started volunteering at the local animal shelter. I was no longer waiting for someone else to make me feel valued, I was doing it for myself. I still thought about Adam and Romy, of course. But I didn't let their silence consume me. I couldn't. I had learned the hard way that I couldn't control other people's actions. All I could do was control my own. And for the first time in years, I felt free. The freedom wasn't loud or dramatic. It was subtle, quiet, like the soft rustle of leaves in the wind. It was the freedom to be myself, to stop pretending, to stop living for other people. It was a feeling I hadn't realized I had been missing for so long. Then, one day, I received a call. It was Adam. His voice was hesitant, unsure, but there was something else in it too, a sense of urgency. "Mom," he said, "I've been thinking a lot about what happened. I know I should have said something, but I didn't know what to do." I could hear the remorse in his voice, and for a moment, I almost didn't know how to respond. "It's okay, Adam," I said, my voice calm. "It's not too late. You just need to be honest with me, with yourself." There was a pause on the other end of the line, and I could almost hear him wrestling with his thoughts. "I don't want to lose you," he said finally. "I don't want things to be like this between us. I'm sorry." His words hit me in a way I wasn't prepared for. I didn't know what I had expected from him, but it wasn't this. "It's okay, Adam," I repeated. "But it's going to take time. I'm not asking for everything to go back to the way it was. I just want us to be real with each other. I'm not going to keep pretending anymore, and I hope you can understand that." "I do," he said quietly. "I understand." The conversation ended, but I could feel a shift. It wasn't a fix-all, but it was a start. A new beginning. I didn't know where things would go from here, but I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't going to let anyone take away my peace again. I had earned it. I had fought for it. And I wasn't going to give it up for anyone. I spent the next few weeks adjusting to this new version of my life. The silence in the house had become familiar, but it no longer felt heavy. It felt like freedom. The weight that had been on my shoulders for so long had finally been lifted. I wasn't trying to please anyone anymore, not Adam, not Romy. I was living for myself. I had signed up for the painting class, and each session felt like a small victory. The canvas was where I could pour all my emotions, where I didn't have to hold anything back. I wasn't just painting images, I was painting my freedom. I spent hours working on my pieces, losing myself in the brushstrokes and colors, letting the world outside fade away. I wasn't thinking about the past. I wasn't thinking about the family that had turned their backs on me. I was thinking only about what I wanted, what made me happy. One evening, as I was finishing up a painting, I heard a knock at the door. My heart skipped a beat, and for a moment, I thought it was Adam. But when I opened the door, it wasn't him. It was Mrs. Carter, the woman from the animal shelter who had become a close friend over the past few weeks. She had been the one who encouraged me to get out more, to do things for myself. She smiled when she saw me. "I thought you might be here," she said. "I've got something for you." She handed me a small envelope, and my curiosity piqued. I opened it and found a card inside, a simple card with a message that made my heart swell. It was from Adam. "Mom, I've been thinking about everything. I want to do better. I want to be there for you, like you've always been there for me. I don't expect you to forgive me right away, but I want to make things right. I'm sorry." My eyes filled with tears as I read the words. I had never expected an apology from him. I had always wanted it, but I never thought it would come. The silence that had hung between us for so long was finally breaking, piece by piece. I felt a sense of relief, but also a sense of caution. The damage had been done, and it would take time for things to heal. But this was a start. A small, fragile start. I looked up at Mrs. Carter, who was watching me closely. "What are you going to do?" she asked gently. I thought about it for a moment. I wasn't sure what I was going to do. Part of me wanted to reach out to Adam, to open my arms and forgive him, to let everything go. But another part of me knew that I couldn't rush this. The hurt was still there, deep down, and it wasn't something that could be fixed overnight. "I'm going to take my time," I said slowly. "I'm going to let him prove it to me. He has to show me he's changed, that he really means it." Mrs. Carter nodded, a soft smile on her face. "That sounds like a good plan. You've been through a lot, Eleanor. Don't rush yourself." I smiled back at her, grateful for her understanding. It felt good to have someone in my corner, someone who wasn't trying to push me into forgiveness or healing. Someone who understood that this was a journey I had to take on my own. The next few days were quiet, but not in a bad way. I spent more time on my art, found new ways to occupy my days, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was waiting for something to change. I had already changed. I didn't need anyone else to complete me. I was complete. One evening, as I was preparing dinner, I received another unexpected call. It was from Adam. I almost didn't answer it, but then I remembered the card. He had reached out, and I had to decide if I was ready to talk. "Hello?" I said, my voice steady. "Mom," Adam said, his voice soft. "I know I haven't done enough, but I want to start making things right. I want to come over, to talk. Can we do that?" I felt my heart tighten. I wasn't sure if I was ready for that. I wasn't sure if I was ready to open up again. But then I realized something. This wasn't about him anymore. It was about me. It was about my decision to move forward. "Okay," I said, my voice quiet but firm. "But we'll take it slow. I'm not going to rush into anything. I need time." "I understand," he said. "I'll be patient." And with that, we agreed to meet the following evening. I hung up the phone, feeling a strange mix of emotions. I didn't know what would happen when we saw each other again. But for the first time in a long time, I wasn't afraid. I was ready to face whatever came next, on my terms. The next day, I took extra care to prepare for our meeting. It wasn't about impressing Adam, it was about making sure I was in the right space. I cooked a simple meal, something that felt comforting but not too heavy. I wanted the evening to feel easy, light, like the beginning of something new, something real. When Adam arrived, he looked different. He wasn't the same person I had seen months ago, distant and cold. There was a warmth in his eyes, a sincerity that hadn't been there before. He apologized again, and I listened, really listened. It wasn't just an apology to make things better. It was an apology because he knew he had wronged me. I could see that. But I didn't rush to forgive him. I let him speak, I let him explain, and I let him show me that he truly understood. The evening ended quietly, but not with tension. We didn't have all the answers, but we were moving forward, step by step. I knew it would take time for things to truly heal, but for the first time, I felt hopeful. Not just for me and Adam, but for the future. The journey was just beginning, but I knew now that I was ready to face whatever came next, on my own terms. I woke up to a strange sense of calm. The morning light filtered through the blinds, casting soft patterns across the floor. I stood at the kitchen counter, preparing my coffee, the familiar scent filling the air. For the first time in years, I didn't feel the weight of the past constantly looming over me. It was as if a heavy fog had finally lifted, leaving me with clarity. The phone call with Adam, the conversation we had shared, was still fresh in my mind. He had apologized, and though it wasn't perfect, it was a start. I didn't expect everything to be fixed overnight. I didn't even expect him to understand everything right away. But for the first time in a long time, I felt like he was trying. That was enough for me. I knew it wouldn't be easy, that there would be bumps along the way, but I wasn't afraid anymore. I wasn't afraid to move forward, to let go of the past, and to finally live for myself. I had spent so many years putting everyone else first, sacrificing my own needs and desires for the sake of others. But I had learned something important in the past few months. I couldn't pour from an empty cup. I needed to take care of myself, to honor my own life and needs. And I was doing that. I had begun to make changes, small but meaningful ones. I started spending more time on my art, something that had always been a passion of mine but had been pushed aside for years. Painting had always been my escape, my way of expressing what words couldn't. It was therapeutic, a way to work through my feelings, my pain, and my joys. It had been so long since I had allowed myself to enjoy something purely for me. But now, I made the time. I signed up for a pottery class too, a hobby I had always wanted to try. It wasn't about becoming an expert, it was about doing something that made me happy, something that was just for me. I also started walking every morning, taking in the beauty of the neighborhood, the fresh air, the stillness of the early morning. It felt good to move, to feel my body stretch and breathe. I hadn't realized how much I had neglected my own well-being. The more I took care of myself, the more I felt like I was reclaiming my life. But even with all these positive changes, I still couldn't shake the feeling that something was missing. I knew that I couldn't change everything overnight, that there was still so much to rebuild, but I had to admit that I was still haunted by the past. Romy. It wasn't just the way she had treated me, it was the way she had manipulated everyone around her. I had been silent for so long, just watching her slowly take over, pretending everything was fine. But now, I couldn't ignore it anymore. I had made my decision. I wasn't going to let her control me or my life anymore. But how? How could I confront her again without letting her tear me down like she had before? I knew I couldn't just ignore it, not when it affected everything in my life. I had to confront her, but I had to do it on my terms. I didn't need her approval or her approval of me. I didn't need to prove anything to her. But I needed closure, and I needed to set boundaries. That's when I decided to call her. The decision to reach out to Romy wasn't easy. I had no idea how she would react, whether she would listen or just shut me down again. But I couldn't let that fear stop me. I had spent too much of my life afraid of what others might think, afraid of rocking the boat. But I wasn't that person anymore. I picked up the phone, my hands slightly trembling, and dialed her number. The phone rang twice before she picked up. Hello? Her voice was as cold as ever. Romy, I said, my voice steady, I need to talk to you. There was a pause on the other end, a brief silence that seemed to stretch on forever. What about? She finally asked, her tone wary. About us, I replied, taking a deep breath. About everything that's happened. What's there to talk about? She snapped. I've already told you how I feel. No, I said firmly, you've told me what you think, but you haven't listened. You've never listened. There was a long pause before she spoke again. I'm not sure I understand what you're getting at. I'm done letting you control me, Romy, I said, my voice calm but resolute. I'm done being your doormat, your punching bag. I've spent too long. Tolerating your behavior, pretending everything is fine. But it's not. And I'm not going to keep pretending. There was a long silence on the other end. I could hear her breathing, could almost feel her trying to process my words. I wasn't sure what I expected from her. I wasn't sure if she would apologize, if she would even care. But it didn't matter anymore. I wasn't doing this for her. I was doing this for me. You can't just ignore everything I've done for you, Romy said finally, her voice low. You think I'm just supposed to forget about everything I've done? I'm not asking you to forget anything, I replied. But I can't keep living in your shadow. I can't keep letting you manipulate me. This is about me taking control of my own life, not about making you feel guilty. I'm done with that. There was a long silence, and for a moment, I wasn't sure if she was going to say anything else. But then, she spoke again. Fine, she said, her voice cold. You want to do this on your own? Go ahead. But don't expect me to sit here and pretend that I care. I took a deep breath. I don't need you to care anymore, Romy. I just need to live my life. And if you're not going to be a part of it, that's okay. The conversation ended abruptly. I hung up the phone, feeling a strange sense of peace. It wasn't the resolution I had hoped for, but it was the resolution I needed. I wasn't going to beg for anyone's love or approval anymore. I was finally living for myself, and that was all that mattered. I woke up to the sound of birds chirping outside my window, the sunlight streaming into the room, casting a warm glow across the walls. It was a new day, and it felt like everything was different. The past few weeks had been a whirlwind of change, but now, I finally felt like I was starting to find my footing again. The weight of the past, the years of neglect, of being silenced, of feeling invisible, it was all still there, but it didn't feel as heavy anymore. I had taken back control. I had made the hard decisions, and now, I was living for myself. I could feel the change within me, a strength I hadn't known I had before. I wasn't afraid anymore. I wasn't afraid of confronting the truth, of setting boundaries, or of being alone. For the first time in my life, I was truly free. I had spent years walking on eggshells, trying to keep the peace, trying to please everyone. But now, I realized that I didn't need anyone's approval. I didn't need their love to feel worthy. I was enough on my own. The phone buzzed on the table, breaking my thoughts. I glanced at it, my heart skipping a beat when I saw the name on the screen, Adam. I hadn't heard from him in a few days. I had been giving him space, not wanting to rush anything, but now I wondered if this was the moment things were going to change for good. I took a deep breath and answered. Hello? I said, my voice calm, steady. Mom, I've been thinking about everything. I don't want things to be like they were before. Adam's voice came through the phone, hesitant but earnest. I know I've been distant, and I know I haven't been there for you like I should have. I'm sorry. I want to make things right. My heart fluttered, a mixture of emotions rushing through me. Part of me wanted to believe him, to reach out and forgive him, but another part of me knew that I couldn't rush into anything. I had spent too much time waiting for him to come around before, only to be let down. I wasn't going to put myself in that position again. Adam, I said gently, I appreciate your apology. But I need to be clear with you. I can't just pretend everything is fine. It's going to take time, and it's going to take more than just words. You have to show me that you mean it. There was a pause on the other end of the line, and I could hear him taking a deep breath. I understand, he said quietly. I know it's not going to be easy, but I'm willing to do whatever it takes. I just want you to know that I'm here, and I want to fix this. I nodded, even though he couldn't see me. It's going to take time, I repeated, but I'm willing to take it one step at a time. The conversation ended on a note of tentative hope. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start. A start that felt different from all the times before. I hung up the phone and sat in silence for a moment, letting the words sink in. I didn't know where this would lead, but I knew one thing: I wasn't going to give up on myself. I had worked too hard to get to this point. I wasn't going to let anyone, not even my own son, take that away from me. I had learned that my happiness didn't depend on anyone else. It depended on me. As the days passed, Adam and I began to rebuild our relationship, slowly but surely. We started talking more, not about the past, but about the present, about the future. I wasn't expecting him to change overnight, but there was a sense of mutual respect starting to form, something we hadn't had before. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I was being heard. Like my voice mattered. But even as things with Adam began to improve, I couldn't help but think about Romy. Our conversation had been brief, and I wasn't sure if she had truly heard me. I wasn't sure if she cared. But I couldn't let her dominate my thoughts anymore. I couldn't keep living in the past. I had to focus on what I could control, and that was me. I had already made my decision. I wasn't going to let her control me, or my life, any longer. I didn't need her approval, and I didn't need her negativity in my life. I had spent too long letting her and Adam dictate my happiness. I had to make the decision to let go. And that was exactly what I did. I started making plans for myself, for the life I had always dreamed of. I wanted to travel, to see the places I had only read about in books. I wanted to experience life on my own terms. For the first time, I was thinking about what I wanted, not just what everyone else needed. I didn't know when, or how, but I knew that it was time to move on. Time to embrace my freedom and make the most of the years ahead. I wasn't waiting for anyone else to decide my future for me. I was taking control of my own life. And I wasn't afraid anymore. The world was wide open, full of possibilities, and I was finally ready to embrace it. I wasn't going to let anyone hold me back, not Romy, not Adam, not even my own doubts. I had spent too many years being afraid, being silent, being invisible. But not anymore. I was ready to step into the world with confidence, to live my life the way I wanted to, and to find happiness on my own terms. It was time for me to truly live. And this was just the beginning. I spent the following weeks in a strange state of transition. It wasn't exactly peace, but it wasn't the chaos I had grown accustomed to either. I wasn't expecting everything to change overnight, but slowly, things started to shift. Adam and I talked more, small talks at first, about the weather, about life, about the trivial things that filled the space between us. It wasn't perfect, but it was progress. I could feel the walls between us slowly crumbling, bit by bit. I had learned to stop waiting for him to come to me. I had learned to take things one step at a time, just as I had learned to live for myself. He wasn't going to change everything right away, but at least he was trying. I wasn't waiting for perfection. I was waiting for authenticity. And that was enough. As the days passed, I began to think about what I truly wanted from life. I had spent so many years waiting for approval, putting everyone else's needs above my own. I was tired of it. It was time to take what was left of my life and make something of it. I was no longer willing to sit on the sidelines. I started making plans to travel, to explore the world that I had been so afraid to step into before. I didn't know when I would go or where I would start, but for the first time, I felt free enough to think about it. I had worked hard to create a life for everyone around me, but now, I was going to create a life for myself. That feeling was something I had never known. And it felt like a victory. But even with the changes in my relationship with Adam, I still had to face the reality of my relationship with Romy. She hadn't changed, and I wasn't sure she ever would. I had tried to give her a chance, to reach out, to set boundaries. But I knew now that there was nothing more I could do. Romy was who she was, and I had to accept that. I didn't have to like it, but I had to accept it. I couldn't keep fighting battles that weren't mine to fight anymore. My peace was more important than trying to change someone who had no desire to change. I still remembered the way she had spoken to me, the things she had said, and how it had made me feel. But it didn't sting anymore. It was just a memory, a painful one, but a memory nonetheless. And I wasn't going to let it define me. I wasn't going to let her words control my happiness. I had spent too many years being manipulated, being dragged through the mud by someone who didn't care about me. But I was done with that. The thought of her didn't consume me the way it used to. I had my own life now, my own dreams, my own goals. And they didn't include her. I decided that I would no longer allow Romy's toxicity into my life. She could stay in her world, and I would stay in mine. The decision was final. As much as I had hoped for things to be different, I had to let go. It wasn't easy, but it was necessary. I couldn't keep letting someone like her dictate the terms of my life. I had already spent too much of my time doing that. I still saw Adam, and we talked about the future. He had promised to try harder, to be more present, and I believed him. But there were still moments of tension, moments where the past reared its ugly head. I knew it would take time to rebuild our relationship, but I was willing to give it that time. I wasn't in a rush anymore. There was no more hurry. No more pretending that everything could be fixed instantly. Life was about patience, about taking things slowly, about healing. And I was healing. I wasn't going to wait for perfection, and I wasn't going to chase after something that wasn't real. I had learned that much. But the most important lesson I had learned was that I was enough. For so long, I had placed my value in others, in how they saw me, in how they treated me. But now, I knew that my worth didn't depend on anyone else's approval. My worth came from within. And for the first time in a long time, I could truly say that I loved myself. I didn't need anyone else to tell me that I was worthy. I knew it for myself. I didn't need anyone else to give me permission to live my life. I had taken that permission for myself. And as I stood there, looking out at the world, I realized that the future was wide open. I didn't know exactly where it would lead me, but I knew that I was ready for whatever came next. I had taken control of my life. I had stopped waiting. And now, I was living. My story was no longer defined by the pain of the past. It was being written by me, and only me. And I was ready for the next chapter.